The air above DracoWar was thick with ash, glowing faintly orange from fires that burned endlessly in the distance. Captain Rylan Corvin crouched behind a jagged rock, his armor scorched and scratched from patrols in this hostile world. Every step he took left a small puff of gray dust, carried away by the thin, acrid wind. Humanity had been sent here to scout and survive, a fragile outpost on a planet that had long been abandoned by mercy. Rylan scanned the horizon, eyes sharp. The city ruins stretched for miles, a skeleton of once towering structures, now melted and twisted by centuries of war. Rogue alien factions had fought here long before humans arrived. Now, scavenger drones and wandering predators prowled the ash-choked streets, looking for the weak, the careless, the alone. Rylan had learned early that weakness meant death. His mission today had been simple: scout the northern ridge, map potential salvage zones and return before nightfall. But simplicity on DracoWar was a dangerous illusion. The moment he stepped onto the cracked ground he felt it, the pulse of life, faint but desperate, somewhere ahead. He moved carefully, crouching low, senses alert. That's when he saw it, a tiny creature trembling on a mound of blackened rubble. Its body was fragile, scaled, and covered with crusted ash, and its wings were folded tightly against its sides. The creature's eyes were huge, glowing gold, staring directly at him with a raw, desperate fear. Rylan froze. His first thought was caution. Alien wildlife was unpredictable, sometimes deadly. But the instinct that had carried humans across worlds, the instinct to act, to help, rose stronger than fear. From his pack he pulled a small chocolate bar. It was hardly a weapon, hardly a proper ration in this harsh environment, but it was something familiar, a little warmth from home. He broke off a piece, slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Here," he whispered. "You need this more than I do." The creature twitched, sniffing the air. Its tail lashed, wings trembling. One step, then two, and it snatched the chocolate in a quick, desperate bite. Its chest heaved as it chewed, its eyes blinking wide as life seemed to return to its tiny body. Rylan smiled, a rare, tired smile, feeling a spark of connection he had not expected. The world around them had not softened. The ash still fell, the distant rumble of molten fissures shook the ground, and overhead, a scavenger drone swept silently, scanning for heat signatures. One wrong move, and both Rylan and the creature could be destroyed in an instant. Yet in that quiet, dangerous moment, something fragile had begun. A trust, a bond, a shared need to survive. Rylan knelt longer than he meant to, watching the small creature recover. Its wings twitched again, sharper this time. The more it ate, the stronger it seemed. A pang of worry hit him. This little thing, clearly a baby dragon, was not supposed to exist here. The species had been declared extinct centuries ago. If word of this reached human command, or worse, enemy scouts, chaos could follow. Yet he could not abandon it. Not now. A sudden noise tore him from his thoughts, the metallic whir of a drone's rotor cutting through the ash-laden air. The small dragon hissed, curling behind Rylan. He knew the creature had no chance against that thing. Humans had technology, yes, but one man alone, exposed and distracted, was an easy target. Rylan scanned the ruins. A collapsed building to the right offered cover. The shadows beneath a scorched tower could hide both of them for a while. He grabbed the creature gently, feeling its fragile weight against his chest. Its heartbeat was fast but steadying under his careful touch. He moved quickly, quietly, through the blackened streets, listening for any sound that suggested danger. Every step had to be precise. Every wrong move could alert scavengers or rival humans desperate for resources. Night approached faster than he expected. The ash fell thicker, blurring the edges of the ruins. Rylan glanced back once. A faint orange glow lit the horizon. The fires were spreading faster than usual. If he did not find shelter soon, he and the baby dragon could be trapped in a furnace of flame and falling debris. The dragon made a soft noise, almost a whimper, pressing closer to him. Rylan whispered, more to steady himself than the creature, "We'll make it. Somehow we'll make it." He felt the weight of responsibility settle on him. Not for soldiers, not for orders, not even for his own survival, but for this tiny, defiant spark of life that depended entirely on him. Ahead, he spotted a narrow canyon between two ruined towers. It offered shadows, a chance to hide, and possibly a safer path toward the human outpost. But the canyon's mouth was narrow and the terrain was unstable. Rock could collapse at any moment, and the echo of a single footstep could carry for miles. Rylan swallowed his fear, tightened his grip on the creature, and began moving. A crack echoed through the canyon, a warning or a trap he could not tell yet. He froze and the dragon shivered against him. Ryland's mind raced. Every instinct screamed danger. And yet, he felt something familiar, the human will to act against impossible odds. He could not turn back. Not now. Somewhere in the shadows ahead, life, or death, was waiting. Ryland pressed deeper into the canyon, his senses alert to every shift of ash and stone. The baby dragon, which he had named Ember, pressed closer to his chest, wings trembling against him. It was fragile but alive, and that was everything. Hunger gnawed at them both. His rations were nearly gone, and Ember had already eaten more than a chocolate bar could sustain. The little creature's chest heaved with effort, each breath a tiny victory. Every shadow seemed to move. DracoWar was alive with danger, and nothing could be ignored. The canyon walls rose high, cracked and molten in patches, dripping heat. Scavenger drones hummed overhead, scanning for any unusual heat signatures. One slip, one wrong step, and they would be spotted. Ryland counted his breaths, measured each step, and kept moving. Humans survived here because they adapted. Humans survived here because they thought faster, acted faster, and refused to give up. A distant howl cut through the canyon. Ryland froze. The sound was low and jagged, echoing off the rock like an angry wind. Predators, Dracothalian serpents, half-armored, half-scaled, with razor teeth and eyes that glowed in the dark, were hunting. They smelled heat, hunger, and weakness. Ember shivered against him. He could feel the tiny pulse of life, fragile but defiant. Humans had faced impossible odds before, and he would face them again, but this was different. This was not just about survival, this was about protecting something extraordinary. The first predator appeared, slithering from a crevice, its armor plates glinting under the faint orange glow. Its jaw opened wide, a hiss of molten breath escaping. Ryland dropped to one knee and threw a small rock across the canyon. The creature's head snapped toward the noise, giving Ryland the chance to move. He took a deep breath and ran along the canyon wall, careful to avoid loose rocks. Ember clutched his chest with tiny claws, wings beating frantically. Two more predators joined, moving in coordinated sweeps, eyes locked on the heat signatures of human and dragon. Ryland's mind raced. He had no weapons left to fight, only quick thinking in the canyon itself. He scanned the walls, jagged outcrops, hanging debris, loose stone. One misstep, one false move, and the canyon could become a trap for both of them. He spotted an unstable overhang ahead and had a plan. If he could dislodge a section of rock as the predators advanced, he could create a barrier, or better, a distraction. Every ounce of his strength went into lifting and pushing, a fine balance between force and timing. Ember squeaked as if sensing the danger. Ryland whispered, "Hold on. You'll see what humans can do." The first predator lunged. Ryland kicked loose the rock. It tumbled down the canyon with a roar, scattering the creatures. Ember flapped weak wings but clung to him, eyes wide. The predators hissed and retreated momentarily, giving Ryland a narrow window. He sprinted, leading Ember through a hidden fissure he had noticed earlier. The canyon grew tighter, forcing him to squeeze through chest-scraping rock, dragon clinging for life. Emerging into a narrow passage, Ryland collapsed briefly, heart hammering. Ember perched on a rock beside him, chest heaving, eyes bright and alive. The little dragon nuzzled his hand. Ryland smiled, a rare, tired smile. Humans were clever, and human courage often carried the day when brawn could not. But he knew the canyon was only the first test. Hunger, heat, and predators would not relent. Night fell fully and the ash clouds thickened, turning the canyon into a gray maze. Ryland's hands were scraped, his armor scorched, but he pressed on. He needed food not just for himself but for Ember. He scanned the terrain for anything edible, anything alive. Small glowing fungi clung to the canyon walls. Ryland ripped a few pieces, tasting the bitter flesh. Not much, but enough for a temporary boost. Ember pecked at them cautiously, then swallowed. A sudden sound made him freeze. A scraping, unnatural, mechanical. A scavenger drone had caught up. Its sensors swept the canyon, searching for heat signatures. Ryland ducked behind a boulder, holding Ember close. The drone hovered above, rotors slicing the ash. One wrong movement and it could alert the predators, or worse, mark them for alien raiders who had been hunting human settlements in the area. Ryland whispered to Ember, "Stay still. Trust me." He observed the drone's pattern, timing its sweeps. Then he moved. Step by careful step, he edged toward a narrow crevice leading out of the canyon. The drone hovered dangerously close, but his calculations held. Human ingenuity, patience, and courage, the same qualities that had kept humanity alive across the stars, were their shield. Emerging from the canyon at dawn, Rylan found a small plateau with shallow water collected from melted ash. Ember drank eagerly, scales gleaming slightly in the rising sun. Rylan poured some of his precious water into his canteen. They were safe for now, but both knew this was only temporary. Hunger still gnawed. Predators still roamed. Enemy drones still hunted. And the little dragon needed more than chocolate or water to survive. Rylan crouched beside Ember, thinking. Humans survived not because they were the strongest but because they would act when others hesitated. He had acted. He had saved Ember at the cost of exhaustion, risk, and ration supplies. But the world ahead promised greater danger. The volcanic forests of DracoWar, the only place with real nourishment for Ember, waited. To reach them, he would have to cross open plains, avoid scavengers, and confront predators far stronger than the canyon serpents. A gust of hot wind swept ash into his eyes. He blinked, shielding them, and glanced down at Ember. The little dragon tilted its head, wings fluttering as if asking what next. Rylan's jaw tightened. Survival meant moving forward no matter the odds. No matter the fear. The human heart, he knew, was strongest when it carried hope into impossible places. He set his jaw, hoisted Ember onto his shoulder, and took the first step toward the forests. Every instinct screamed danger. Every nerve tensed for the unknown. And somewhere deep in the shadows ahead, life, or death, was waiting. Rylan and Ember moved cautiously through the ash-choked forests at the edge of the volcanic plains. The trees were blackened and twisted, their bark cracked from heat and age. Even here, the land fought against life. Hot steam hissed from fissures in the ground, and occasional geysers of molten liquid forced them to leap aside or retreat. Ember's wings, now stronger but still fragile, twitched with each cautious step. Rylan kept scanning, ears alert to the smallest sound. Every shadow could conceal danger. Every vibration of the ground might signal predators or human enemies. He had learned quickly, on DracoWar hesitation could be fatal. He whispered, "Stay close. No sudden moves." Ember huffed softly as if understanding. The forest grew thicker and with it the risk. Scavenger drones had been spotted the day before, and their mechanical hums echoed faintly in the distance. Rylan's mind ran calculations fast. Escape routes, elevation changes, possible hazards. Every decision mattered. One misstep could get them both killed or worse, Ember captured. Then suddenly the air shifted. It carried a metallic smell, acrid and sharp, cutting through the sulfur of the volcanic soil. Rylan froze. Ahead, through a gap in the trees, he saw movement, sleek, low-profile ships descending in formation. Alien marauders. The human outpost had warned of their patrols, and now they had found him in Ember. Rylan's heart pounded, but he did not panic. Panic was fatal. He scanned the forest floor, twisted roots, fallen trees, shallow pits. He needed a plan. If they approached openly, they would be overpowered. He could not outrun the ships in the open, not with Ember slowing him. But humans survived here because humans adapted. He could survive because he would not just run, he would fight with his mind. He spotted an ancient stone ruin, half-collapsed, forming a natural tunnel. It could conceal them, but it also meant they could be trapped if the marauders realized his plan. Rylan made a quick decision. He ducked into the shadows of the ruin, Ember clinging to his back. From here he could observe, calculate, and act. The alien ships hovered closer, their sensors scanning for heat. One of the marauder soldiers disembarked, armored in dark plates, scanning the forest for movement. Ember hissed softly, wings flaring. Rylan placed a hand over the dragon's tiny chest, whispering, "Quiet. Trust me." He remembered the small devices he had salvaged on previous patrols, holographic projectors, portable decoy emitters. He set them on the ruin's outer ledge, hiding behind a collapsed wall. With careful hands he activated the sequence. Suddenly, multiple holographic images of Ember appeared across the forest, flapping, squeaking, moving in erratic patterns. The marauder soldier froze. His scanner picked up multiple heat signatures, all moving rapidly. Confused, he radioed for backup. Rylan held his breath, keeping Ember pressed tight. The drones above swiveled, following the projected duplicates. Every step Rylan had calculated, every instinct honed by centuries of human survival, now worked as a weapon. A second wave of soldiers approached, alerted by the drones. Rylan could hear their armored boots crunching ash and broken wood. He had seconds to act. He triggered a small flare, scattering sparks and smoke, blinding the sensors temporarily. The marauders shouted, weapons firing indiscriminately. The holograms flapped through the smoke, confusing their aim further. Rylan bolted from the ruin with Ember clutched to his chest. The drones scanned overhead, the soldiers firing blindly, and the little dragon flapped weakly but kept balance. They ran through the forest, ducking low, leaping over fissures, ducking under low-hanging branches. Every movement was precise, every step calculated to avoid heat sensors, pits, and molten runoff. They reached a narrow ravine. Rylan knew it was their only chance. He lowered Ember gently to the ground and motioned toward the edge. The marauders were still several hundred meters behind. With a final glance, Rylan grabbed a dangling vine and swung Ember across first. The little dragon squeaked in alarm but landed safely on the opposite ledge. Rylan followed, rolling upon landing, feeling the heat of nearby molten rock. The marauders reached the ravine but their path was blocked. Rylan's improvised barriers, scattered rocks, and fallen debris slowed their advance. Ember perched on a rock, wings spread, a strange mix of defiance and trust in the human who had risked everything for him. Rylan panted, sweat stinging his eyes, but he could not allow relief. The enemy would regroup and Ember needed proper food, not chocolate or temporary safety. Rylan looked ahead. The forest opened into a narrow valley, leading toward the volcanic springs, the only place with nutrient-rich water that could sustain Ember and allow him to grow strong. Every step toward it would be dangerous. Every choice could mean life or death. But humans thrived against impossible odds because they refused to stop moving, refused to give in, and refused to let fear dictate their actions. He knelt beside Ember, brushing ash from its golden scales. "We're not safe yet," he said quietly. "But you'll live. You'll grow. And I'll make sure nothing stops that." Ember chirped softly, pressing against him. In that moment, Rylan felt the weight of responsibility heavier than any weapon or armor. He had saved life once, but the real test was just beginning. From the shadows above, a faint hum warned that the alien patrols were not far behind. Rylan tightened his grip on Ember. The forests of DracoWar, the volcanic springs ahead, and the trials to come awaited. One thing was clear: human courage, human intelligence, and the will to act against impossible odds were all that stood between survival and disaster. And somewhere in the distance, the first hint of flame from the volcanic springs glowed, promising hope, but only if they could reach it alive. Rylan stepped into the narrow valley, carrying Ember on his shoulder. The air was hotter here, tinged with sulfur and the faint stench of molten rock. The volcanic springs glimmered ahead, a promise of life in a world that had none to spare. But getting there would be a battle against the land itself. DracoWar did not forgive weakness, and every step forward demanded every ounce of skill and courage Rylan had. The ground was unstable. Small fissures opened suddenly, releasing jets of scalding steam. Rocks fell from the cliffs above with terrifying unpredictability. Rylan's armor burned in patches where he brushed against hot stone, and Ember squirmed nervously on his shoulder, claws digging into his jacket. Hunger gnawed at him, exhaustion clawed at his body, but stopping was not an option. The first challenge came quickly. A river of molten rock cut across the valley, flowing faster than it appeared from a distance. There was no bridge, no easy way across. Rylan scanned the edges and found a fallen tree, blackened but intact, spanning part of the river. He tested it carefully. It groaned under his weight but held. Slowly, he balanced Ember against his chest and stepped onto it. Each movement was deliberate, every breath measured. One misstep and they would be consumed by fire. Halfway across, a tremor shook the valley. Rocks above shifted and molten droplets fell, sizzling against the tree. Rylan froze, holding Ember tight. The baby dragon hissed, wings flaring. Rylan whispered, "Almost there. Trust me." A small gust of wind helped, but he moved as though each second was a lifetime, careful not to panic. He made it to the other side, heart pounding, sweat and soot stinging his eyes. Ember landed safely and nuzzled him briefly, a silent gesture of trust. No time to rest. The path ahead was jagged cliffs rising toward the volcanic springs. The only way forward was vertical, climbing sheer rock faces with narrow footholds and dangerous overhangs. Rylan dug deep, pulling himself up handhold by handhold, careful to test each grip. Ember clung to his chest, tiny claws gripping tightly, wings brushing against hot stone. Halfway up the cliff, a loud crack sounded. A section of rock above threatened to collapse. Rylan's reflexes kicked in. He shoved Ember to a small ledge, holding him steady, while he jammed a stick into a crevice to redirect the falling rocks. The debris crashed behind him, shattering the cliff face but leaving them unscathed. Ember chirped nervously and Rylan patted its head. "See? Humans find a way." The air grew thinner as they climbed higher, each breath a struggle. Toxic gases seeped from cracks in the cliffs. Rylan fashioned a makeshift mask from torn cloth and wet it in the small amount of water he carried. Ember coughed softly but seemed to manage. Survival here required brains as much as bravery. Rylan knew that brute force alone would not carry them through this. Near the top, the final challenge revealed itself. A lava flow had blocked the last stretch, bubbling in bright, radiating heat that made the air shimmer. Rylan examined the terrain. One false step would mean instant death. But he noticed a series of jagged boulders forming a narrow, unstable path across the molten river. He could make it, but only with careful timing. He whispered to Ember, "Stay calm. We can do this." The dragon flapped weakly but pressed close. Step by step, Rylan balanced across the boulders, calculating each jump, each weight shift. Ember's claws brushed the stones, adding pressure, but Rylan adjusted constantly. Halfway across, a boulder slipped. He caught Ember with one arm, steadying the dragon, and leapt to the next stone with a surge of adrenaline. Heat radiated from all sides, but the human will refused to falter. Finally they reached the edge. Rylan collapsed briefly, chest heaving, soot and sweat streaking his face. Ember hopped from his arm to the ground, wings stretching wide for the first time in weeks. The volcanic springs glimmered before them, nutrient-rich water pooled in shallow basins, steaming in the dawn light. Ember approached carefully and drank deeply, scales shimmering as life returned in full. Rylan knelt beside the dragon, watching. This was the moment all risk, all courage, and all ingenuity had been leading to. He had navigated lethal terrain, fought through exhaustion and hunger, and outsmarted the very world itself to bring Ember here. Humans survived because they acted when others hesitated. Humans thrived because they refused to let fear dictate their choices. And now, a fragile life that should have been lost was thriving because of him. The volcanic plain stretched endlessly around them. From here, other dangers could come, predators, marauders, natural disasters. But Rylan felt a sense of triumph unlike any before. He had defied death, gravity, and the unforgiving land. Ember chirped, flapped its wings and pressed close against him. The bond was no longer fragile. It was a partnership forged in fire, courage, and sheer determination. Rylan knew the journey wasn't over. He would have to return, secure the outpost, and protect Ember from those who might exploit it. But for now he allowed a rare moment of relief. They had survived the impossible. They had conquered the impossible. And in that victory, Rylan felt something more profound. Humans were capable of greatness, even against odds the universe itself seemed to declare insurmountable. A plume of smoke rose from the distant horizon, signaling that new challenges awaited. Marauders would not give up, and DracoWar would continue to test them. But Rylan stood tall, chest heaving, eyes sharp. Ember nudged him, wings poised to lift. Together they would face whatever came next. Because humans did not flee danger, they met it. They adapted. They triumphed. And sometimes, the greatest victories began with protecting something as small and fragile as a dragon, against a world that wanted to destroy it. Rylan crouched beside Ember, watching the baby dragon lap at the nutrient-rich waters of the volcanic springs. The creature's scales shimmered golden in the dawn light, vibrant and strong, a stark contrast to the brittle ash-covered shell it had been weeks before. Rylan's hands trembled slightly, not from exhaustion though his body still ached, but from a rare mixture of relief and awe. He had done it. He had carried life through fire, famine, and deadly terrain, and now it thrived. The outpost would be the next challenge. Word of Ember's survival could spark fascination, fear, and greed. Humans would argue over what to do with it, and alien factions might see it as a prize or threat. Rylan knew the world beyond this spring would not forgive weakness or hesitation. But he also knew something profound. Life, fragile and extraordinary, could flourish if a human was willing to act against impossible odds. He leaned back on a warm rock, eyes scanning the horizon. The volcanic plain stretched endlessly, smoke and steam curling upward in twisted shapes. Behind them, the treacherous cliffs and rivers they had crossed still glimmered in the rising sun, a record of the battles fought and won. Rylan smiled faintly, brushing ash from Ember's golden scales. "You're safe now," he whispered. "And we'll make sure you stay that way." Ember chirped, a soft, high-pitched sound, and nuzzled him in return. It flapped its wings experimentally, wings no longer fragile but strong enough to lift in short bursts. The bond between them had grown deeper than instinct or survival. It had become trust, respect, and a shared sense of purpose. Rylan had saved Ember's life, but in return, Ember had reminded him of why humans continued to fight, to protect, to nurture, to do what was right even when the odds were impossible. Rylan's thoughts returned to the outpost. Supplies were scarce and the journey back would be dangerous. Marauder patrols were still active, and predators lurked in shadows. But he had a plan. Ember's growing strength, combined with his own ingenuity, could turn future threats into manageable challenges. Humans thrived because they thought faster, acted smarter, and refused to accept defeat. He had survived this valley and the volcanic ascent by relying on every ounce of his skill, courage, and resourcefulness, and he would do the same on the journey home. The first real challenge appeared almost immediately. From the edge of the spring, Rylan noticed smoke rising in the distance, not from the volcanic fissures but from mechanical rotors and alien engines. Marauder scouts had followed the trail of their heat signatures. The creatures had not forgotten and they had not forgiven. Rylan tightened his grip on Ember. Every instinct screamed danger, but he refused to panic. Humans survived because they faced the impossible head-on. He spotted a narrow ridge leading to a series of dense forest patches. From there they could move undetected. Rylan instructed Ember to stay low, his voice firm but gentle. Together they navigated the ridge, slipping past patrols, ducking beneath sensors and using every shadow to their advantage. The alien scouts passed within meters without noticing them. It was a dangerous dance, but human ingenuity made the difference. Careful timing, observation, and understanding the behavior of both allies and enemies. By midday they had gained significant ground. Rylan paused, letting Ember drink from another shallow basin. The dragon's scales glimmered as it shook itself, wings stretching wide. Rylan marveled at the transformation. A creature once frail and starving was now vibrant, strong, and full of life. And it was not just survival that had changed Ember, it was the trust they had forged, the courage they had shared, the choices made against all odds. As they descended toward the outpost, the first humans spotted them from a distant ridge. Soldiers froze, mouths open, eyes wide. The story of Rylan and the dragon would spread quickly. This was no ordinary survival tale. Humans had faced death, environmental extremes, and enemy forces, yet one man's courage had saved a life thought lost. It was a story that would inspire generations. Rylan lowered Ember to the ground near the edge of the outpost. The dragon's eyes scanned the new humans cautiously, then softened, recognizing the bond they shared with its savior. Children approached, hesitant at first, then awed as Ember let them touch its shimmering scales. Rylan smiled faintly. He had done more than survive. He had reminded everyone that humans were capable of heroism beyond measure. Commanders arrived soon after, assessing the situation. Rylan explained the journey, the ash-choked canyons, the molten rivers, the marauder attacks, the volcanic ascent. They listened, incredulous but impressed. This was human ingenuity, courage, and morality on display, a demonstration of how one individual could defy impossible odds and change the course of life itself. Ember chirped again, nuzzling Rylan's arm. He looked down at the dragon and felt a quiet pride. It was not just the dragon who had survived. Humanity had proven something vital. Courage, intelligence, and the willingness to act when the world seemed against you were what made humans exceptional. And sometimes the smallest acts, sharing a chocolate bar with a fragile creature in need, could ripple into legends. As night fell, the outpost gathered around Ember and Rylan. Children listened with wide eyes. Soldiers whispered admiration. Rylan finally allowed himself to relax, watching Ember curl against him, wings folded, chest rising and falling steadily. The baby dragon would grow strong, would thrive, and the bond between them would inspire countless others. In that quiet moment, Rylan realized the truth of humanity: survival was not enough. It was courage in the face of impossible odds, ingenuity when all seemed lost, and morality when others might choose convenience over action. Humans did not just survive. They elevated life, protected the fragile, and turned despair into hope. Ember chirped softly again, nudging Rylan. The bond they shared was a symbol of everything humans could achieve. Life saved through courage, heroism, and heart. And somewhere deep in the stars, stories would carry this legend, of the human soldier who shared chocolate with a starving dragon, faced death itself, and created the sweetest bond imaginable. And so, Rylan stood, chest rising with pride, eyes fixed on the horizon. The world was dangerous, unrelenting, and unforgiving, but humans thrived because they refused to stop, refused to yield, and refused to let hope die. Ember flapped its wings experimentally, lifting slightly into the air. Together they would face the next challenge as humans always had, with courage, determination, and an unbreakable will.